And now it's time for Ag Geek Speak with
GK Technologies,
Sarah and Jody.
In the fields again. I just can't wait to get in the fields again. The life I love is spreading potash for my friends, and I can't wait to get in the fields again. No, I can't wait to get in the fields again.
Welcome back to Ag Geek Speak. We were having so much fun talking with Kyle Okke for the previous 2 episodes that we thought we'd bring him back for a third. Third time's a charm. Truth be known, we were having such a great conversation about variable rate pesticides, in particular herbicides, that we thought we would continue the conversation. In the previous 2 episodes, episode 1 of this series, we talked about the concept of, just what this variable rate residual herbicide concept is. The second episode, we talk a lot about the equipment and the actual sprayer technology that's needed in order to make this happen. But we've concluded the second conversation, and here we make maps at GK Technology, and we haven't even talked about mapping. So let's get back into it again, Kyle. And first of all, help us understand just roughly, like when you start to think about even putting together a map, where do you even start with trying to figure out the data that you need to figure out how to variable rate this?
So I guess where I absolutely started on the coarsest level, without getting into the fine details, is I am still just utilizing the zone productivity maps that I soil sample off of.
Okay.
So I am in a lot of cases using that very map still. And especially when everything kind of lines up nice, like I was saying offline, I said my favorite part about using ADMS is that the user has full control over what you're doing. And so there's nothing, not yet anyways, a fully automated zone making system that is going to get it right. It takes intimate knowledge of the person doing the mapping of the field to really, and that takes collaboration with the person that farms in some cases, or in many cases, I should say. And then, or you're the agronomist that's out 4-wheeling in that field all summer, and you see how crops produce on there, and you go, well, that bad spot is bad because of this reason, and that bad spot over there is bad because of this reason. We focus a lot on the poor areas, which happen to be the driving force behind making these variable rate residual maps.
Okay.
And so, yeah, so you see a poor area because maybe it has a thin clay pan 6 inches under the ground, and it accumulates a lot of soluble salts. And no matter what, that area probably isn't going to grow field peas very well. It probably isn't going to grow sunflowers or some of these other things really well. I personally want to put more product down in those areas because that's the respawn spot for kochia is the big driver there. And so I'm okay with it being a sacrificial to the crop area if I can try to hammer it harder with a residual herbicide in that area.
And reduce the overall seed bank for the entire field is kind of your thought process. The weed seed bank, sorry. Okay.
I actually have other ideas around those areas, but I'm not going to go there yet. But then anyways, so you have poor because of like the traditional where we're reducing the rate because it's coarse soils and high organic or coarse soils, low organic matter, high pH, those areas. And those are uncovered. Yeah. Once you make a really awesome zone map, because you're using ADMS, you're using your personal knowledge of the field, you're parsing out and you're doing the mod zone thing. So you're all of a sudden going from your standard, 5-zone map or 3-zone map, let's call it, but I like 5 zones. And now you're modding things and you're going, well, this poor area is because of this reason. This poor area is because of this reason. Totally different landscape position. So all of a sudden you have your 5-zone map and it turns into a 6 or 7 or 8-zone map.
Yep.
Because of those things. And once you have those parameters separated out, and now if those extra zones are big enough, sometimes they're small. You're like, oh yeah, well that's white. The ground is, and all it does is grow kochia. You're like, I don't really need to know much more about that. I don't need to soil sample it to tell you that it's got 1,000 parts per million sodium and the pH is like 9, things like that. But then you'll get these bigger areas and you're like, well, no, crop grows in them. And so then you start, but once you have them separated, all of a sudden the results make a lot more sense when you get them. And then that's the power of that. So that's the base map, I guess, that I've always used for doing the variable rate residual applications, because, went through the due diligence through your guys' help initially teaching me, what to, how to mod those things out. And then all of a sudden the results make sense. And then, so that's really the majority of the map I use as my base map from soil sampling.
But one of the things that I have enjoyed about when you're soil sampling in the fall of the year on your social media accounts where people can follow you, I love it when you go out and you soil sample these different zones and you are showing just even the different colors of the soil in these zones.
Yeah, the buckets, yeah.
Huge differences. And then when you put that with the soil sample results beside that, it's just amazing. So can you, in some of these fields that you manage, can you help us understand the diversity of soil parameters that would affect the activity of a residual herbicide? Like, what's the variability that you're finding across some of these fields that you're managing?
So the color really stands out. The color is the tell. You can go from like this nice, really dark looking soil to like almost a very light tan or white in some cases. And the color difference is actually mostly organic matter. That's the big difference there. And so you can generally tell high versus low organic matter, although the soil test tells you exactly how much organic matter. It's way better at telling you the true organic matter in those areas, because I've had these huge color differences. I'm like, wow, this must be like a 3 or 4 point organic matter difference, because I do have that big of a spread sometimes in fields. But
wow,
I've had those huge color differences and still only be like 1.5 points of organic matter change.
That's a really good observation, right? Because like one thing too, you mentioned about your high spots in your fields, like your hilltops, those tend to have a higher calcium carbonate level or higher pH, which means there's likely a lot more calcium carbonate.
It's totally
and we can
what
see
it
that
is,
it's white, like it imparts a whiteness to the soil. You can see that here in the valley, places with high calcium carbonate. You can see that whiteness in the soil. So yeah, like you were saying, organic matter is contributing to the color, but there's other things too that can be a part of that are contributing to it.
Definitely other parameters that are affecting that. But yeah, it's like, seems like organic matter is the big one, right? But yeah, the calcium carbonate. So there's things like, I don't know, gives you your agronomist spidey sense on that one. When you're looking at that, you're like, oh, okay, yep. You can really see the difference here. And yeah, and then when you see that like really light color, you're like, that must have more calcium carbonate in there, because there's some that are just plain red, when you get that too. And that's maybe more like parent material than it is anything.
So, and that's interesting because in your neck of the woods, not only do you apparently have these areas where you've got accumulations of calcium carbonate, which for the world out there that wants the layman's term, that's lime. Okay. So if you have a low soil pH, what do? You apply lime. So that's just areas of accumulated lime, high pH. But then you also deal with a lot of low pH areas out there. So it's interesting to me to think about this residual herbicide concept from even a soil pH parameter. So what are some of the soil pH differences that you can find out there across some of your fields?
Well, if you like, here's the highest and here's the lowest that I've seen. So the highest I've seen into the high 8s, like 8.7, I think is maybe some of the highest I've seen.
Ufta.
Yeah, Ufta Meta. Yeah, pretty high.
Yeah.
On the low end, I've been in the 4s on the low end. Now that's extreme. Like the only time I ever ended up with 4s in soil sampling is diagnostic soil sampling. And so those are the places I've done that where I had the combination of something's not right in this field, and these patches are like dead. They came up, but they're dead. And it's like, what's going on here? This year we did some again at Durham, which is susceptible to acidic pH, or it's not as susceptible to acidic pH. It's susceptible to aluminum toxicity more so. Or
more sensitive than hardwood spring wheat to
yeah, absolutely.
low pH problems then.
Yeah, to the problems associated with low pH. There we go. And diagnostically soil sampling very specifically, like the spot on the spot. Yeah, we've got some down to like the low 4s.
Oof.
And I've heard of some in the high 3s. I've heard in those areas. Yeah.
And those diagnostic tests, was that 0 to 3 or 0 to 6 that you were getting those low 4s?
I haven't diagnosed done 0 to 3s. It's all been 0 to 6.
Okay. So even at a 0 to 6, you're getting to low 4s.
Yeah, I guess that's the barometer I put myself on stuff when I'm like, hey, I'm in the low 4s on a 0 to 6. I could give 2 craps about the 0 to 3 because most of the time you'll see where it's lower pH in there because that's stratified. But when you're now taking your entire acre furrow slice and you're seeing that low, you're like, we got a problem.
Yep.
Tillage can't fix that problem.
No.
Flipping the soil over isn't going to do it. You know, this is that's called your base material doesn't even have enough calcium carbonate in it to overcome this. You got to add it. You know?
Absolutely.
And so that's definitely so diagnostically sampling. But I would say like on a normal, like when you look at the traditional precision soil sampling that I've been doing, I do see in the low 5s quite often.
Which is indicative that there are spots that are below 5 throughout those areas. That
absolutely.
And thinking about Sarah's question and about like how you're putting these maps together and how you're choosing rates, like I'm guessing probably a field by field basis of like, yeah, you're in a field. What do you look at first? Like, do you say, I know I need to reduce the rate for the hilltops to focus on crop safety? Or I suppose what's your thought process? Where do you even start to make the decision on how you're going to vary things?
So the only farms that I've been doing this with on the variable rate is one, they have to have the sensitive crop that have the history of going, what we've been doing at flat rates is detrimental to the sensitive areas. So it starts there. And then it also kind of goes like, do we have a manageable weed population? Because if we're going to reduce the rate, are we going to be okay doing that? You know, like even if you have perfectly clean fields, it doesn't mean that you don't want to use residual herbicide at all, right? Especially in these specialty crops, because we do not have a post-emergent option that's very effective. The best option is the pre-emergent option. So even with clean fields, we still want to apply something to the field so we have a layer of protection. So we're going to be putting something no matter what. But I've got some farms that I'm like, our kochia pressure is far too great. Sometimes I've just like said, no, you're not planting sunflowers, not in this field. So I've legitimately had those conversations. And we joke about that. I go, and I like one of the guys was the first year I worked with him, and I said, I'm not going to rock the boat. I'm more here to like help you along, make sure there's no disasters, but I'm not going to change a lot of what you do. I want to know how you operate first. And I remember seeing one of the first fields, and it was slated to go to sunflowers, and I'm like, nope, this isn't happening. Nope.
Kyle's like takes the oar, flips the canoe over, rocking the boat.
I was like, not happening. Yeah.
So it sounds like in general, right? Like you're going in with the purpose of, okay, are we trying to reduce crop sensitivity here? Like that's probably the main goal. And then
that's the big driver. And then as time's gone, and so this takes field history. So this is, for the farms I consult for. And it's like I was saying at the, in the previous session, is that we have these perpetual problem areas. And that's where now we're looking harder going, okay, we can identify these perpetual problem areas, know that with the rest of the parameters we have in those areas, we could run a stronger rate without injuring our crop because we have the correct parameters. Now we're looking at, how do we layer on top of this, or how do we, adjust what we're doing instead of just being a damage mitigation to the crop, but actually being effective or more effective on our weed control basis by running stronger rates of residual where needed.
So
I
it's like
also
you've. Oh, go ahead,
oh,
Sarah.
I also want to throw in that this can help us manage our rotation for next year too. There's so often where we're dealing with, especially with specialty crops where there's not a lot of herbicide options. We want to make sure that we are managing the weeds in the crop the year of, because we know we're going to be raising more of these specialty crops going forward. And that rotational restriction going to future crops can sometimes be a challenge. So, let's say you've got a soybean acre out there with sulfentrazone and you want to go to, some other crop out there where there's rotational restrictions. Hope, even if you're applying an average rate across a field that is by the label, if you've got these variable areas within a field, that rotation can really get affected in spots. You can see the effect the next year. So, yeah, we have to make sure that we're maximizing the weed control in these areas. We need to make sure that we're minimizing the injury in the year of, and we also need to make sure we've got that rotational restriction that's actually going to work the following year too.
And it sounds like, Kyle, like right now you kind of have like a basic level, like level 1. Let's just mitigate damage. But then like beyond that, like you said, like once you have a feel for the crop history and how things respond, like level 2 is like, okay, destroy spawn sites. Can we increase the rates a little bit and make the herbicide more effective? And then level 3 might be, okay, we can even push some rates further in areas that have different pH levels that we can see. Or what are some other things? Are there anything else that you consider to like increasing your rate?
So base level, like level 1 kind of style is using that very well thought out zone map that has the mod areas so that you have correctly parsed out, zones that are representative of the actual parameters that are making them the poor areas. Okay. So then you have as accurate as possible, which that's like the big leap into it. But then there's actually pretty decent equipment out there. And so one of them is, I have the fortune to work with 2 farms right now, and they have these SmartFirmers from Precision Planting on their planters. And that has an organic matter screen on it. And so it makes this really nice organic matter map. And so it's relative organic matter, but it's pretty close. So if you take the organic matter map, which it makes this really awesome granular organic matter map with a real fine detail of where it's high and low, and it gives you kind of a general percentage organic matter, but it's relative, it's not calibrated. It's just a relative organic matter. So if you take your knowledge of, okay, soil sample says this on each zone, and now I have my organic matter map from my SmartFirmer planter, it's super cool data. You immediately see like where the lowest stuff is. You're like, that's exactly where the injury is happening the worst.
Are you kind of like cross-calibrating it then back to your soil sample results that you actually get from soil sampling, and then you can see the variability from the SmartFirmer map?
So I haven't been cross-calibrating necessarily, because I think still in the end, like, unless you have nozzle by nozzle control on your sprayer, you can't get super granular with your application. You're still applying across your whole boom for the most part. And so you still got to remember, like, where we have this like super fine resolution kind of data with like, so we can paint this data with like these really fine brush strokes, but we're like using a roller painter for your wall for the application.
We're going to the Bob Ross episode
Yeah,
where we talked about that back
That's
in
right.
season 1 of Ag Geek Speak.
Happy trees, happy trees.
Yeah. We have the Bob
Sad
Ross
Kosha.
of map quality, but your sprayer is more like your commercial painter for a house. Like sure, you can do so much, but you can't. But that commercial painter isn't going to be able to do what Bob Ross does. So you have to keep that in mind. So that's back to like where those layers of information are extremely helpful. And for me, it's helping make the decision. Like there might be certain like areas that I mod that I go, I do actually want to shut off sulfentrazone on a couple of those because it's so low in organic matter. Like it's finding the bullseye. And so then you can cross-reference and go, hey, yep, this area is definitely big enough. This will actually make a few cells for the rate controller to actually catch where it could shut it off.
So you primarily use zones, your productivity zones, and you assign your carrier rate to the zone.
Yes.
And so you're variable rating your carrier rate, and you know what your active ingredient rates are going to be going into that carrier rate. Once you have that prescription built, have you ever modded or changed areas within the prescription itself to do something maybe a little bit different or enhance, the prescription that's coming out of those zone assigned rates?
Yeah, there's definitely modding the whole way through. Like I said, it's kind of, that's the fun part about ADMS is that you can get as very detailed specific as you want and all that. So the big one is instead of having like these nice feathered rates, you kind of I've been going by like single gallon breaks. So then the zones go by the changes are single gallons at a time, and depending on the rate controller, it seems like the John Deere and the Raven stuff, I've just gone single gallon rates. That's handled it flawlessly, no issues. Like a Pro 700 seems like, and the Trimble systems seem like they're just any way you can make it more simple, the better it performs. And then instead of doing like, I cut it in half even more. So then it's gone to just like if we're going to go from 5 to 10 gallons, I do a 5, a 7.5, and a 10 instead of like a 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 kind of thing. And do the rate changes like that. So the rate controllers I've played with a little bit by, changing my parameters within each zone. That way I also like to do the mod area thing so this is like where, like all of us that spend a lot of time on ADMS have multiple screens.
Yep.
And so I'll have a screen of the lidar overlay with the zone map, and I'll have that screenshotted. And on one screen, I love using the University of California, Davis Google Earth extension, and I have that on one screen. And so I'm looking at like soil series, landscape position, and then I'm in here, doing like the zone vectorized thing, and I'm looking at those polygons, and I'm hitting control or shift and click, and highlighting stuff and going, yep, these are low landscape positions. I do know that these are, like my sacrificial areas, whatever. I'm going to run higher rates here. And I've gone through and I go mod those up to higher rates because I'm like, I don't want to run that lower rate in those areas. And so, yeah, sure. I'm constantly changing those things, and there's like no algorithm to do that. That's just kind of like the agronomist's final touch,
Right. And it's your knowledge based on how you've like scouted those fields and what you know.
And I try to, those are hard things to teach. You just, that's your intuition. And everyone with their own intimate field knowledge of those fields are the only ones that are going to be able to do that. Is you go through like, oh yeah, that map, I don't like that low rate over there. So I'm going to just go through here and go highlight these sections, and I'm going to go remod this area. And then I'm going to go smooth this out again, and I'm going to reproject it. And okay, now this looks good. Like, oh, too many jagged edges on this isn't going to work for a sprayer. You got to remember, it's like 120 feet at a time.
Mm-hmm.
So you keep adjusting, and you have to see what these as applied maps look like to see how they're capturing it, because that's a big eye opener to this whole thing.
That's good. So often I think we forget to take a look at that as applied data. And especially as we start moving into these liquid sprayers, that's probably a really important key to reflect upon, so we know how to make these prescriptions even better going forward.
So what was the eye opener? Like, what surprised you, Kyle? And maybe you're just about to say that.
Well, so this general idea goes far beyond just the spraying. But seeing what your as applied maps look like on a sprayer, on a drill, on a liquid applicator, whatever, seeing the actual as applied map is really helpful in helping them, the operator. So if that's the hired person, if that's a custom applicator, if that's the farmer that's running their own equipment, you start to see like the tails in and out of like zones, because those tails show up in the as applied maps.
Absolutely.
And so, you look at those things and you're like, hey, you got to set your look ahead times differently. Or, you start to look at how those as applied maps go in and out of your zones. And you're like looking at this one poor zone and you're like, oh, there's only like 3 swaths that go through this. You're like, okay, that makes me think differently about this. Or, you're like, I thought that zone was bigger than that. It was like only one little tiny grid. One swath with that hit that. So you're like, okay, I got to think about this a little differently. And then you can make like small micro adjustments on, well, basically, like the cool thing about ADMS is you can get so granular on stuff. You're like, wow, this is such an awesome looking map. But you still have to go back to it's still the roller painter versus the fine brush strokes, on some of the equipment, and so then and that's okay. That's because you're still achieving what you need to achieve. But
sometimes you have to think about it differently to get it done with that versus something else.
Yeah. So there's so much more little nuance in this that, like I've never actually sat and explained this to the farmers I work with. We just got like a just really awesome trust level, and they're like, you'll make it work, and so they probably don't even realize the amount of like backside that
Don't pay attention to the man behind the curtain.
Yeah. That's like, I don't try to take extra credit for that kind of stuff. I'm just like, it is what it is. It's like my thing is it drives me nuts to see injured stuff as much as they see it. So it's like, let's avoid this.
Right.
Yeah, because thinking about it, like data collection wise, like there isn't anything that's going to tell us where these spots are, right? Because Kyle, we talked about these levels of what you're varying for. It's both injury prevention and also increasing weed control. Like, what kind of data could you collect from the soil? There's not just one thing or one piece of data that could get you a direct answer as to how to change that rate. There's no sort of sensor. And like, as I think about it, having some knowledge in weed science and soils, like there's not an easy data point that can get you that answer. You need that intimate knowledge and experience to put that map together.
Or it takes a lot of time and money to get the parameters, because I was going to say, you could have through the company Veris, you have their EC sensors, and there's one of them in particular, a couple of them that have a pH probe, and so it gives you again a relative pH in the field. But that's a very time-consuming process. It's not like a continuous meter. You have to stop. The probe has to go into the ground. It has to sit until the pH stabilizes on the probe. And then when it comes back out, it has to get sprayed and cleaned off. And so it's an expensive piece of machinery, and it's very time-consuming. And there's a lot of things that can go wrong when you're bebopping around in a field for, well, there's another consultant here by the name of Josh Hammond that owns one of those that is doing that very thing by getting EC maps and pH maps, because he has clients of his that are doing variable rate lime applications for this. And he's discovered that the pH thing is a very granular, like a very fine change in place to place, but it's the amount of time it takes to make those kind of maps. All of a sudden, is that you wouldn't specifically be making that kind of map just for precision applied residual herbicide.
Yes.
It's a nice byproduct if you're going to be doing lime applications, because that's going to be the driving force to spending the money to have someone go through that kind of labor with that kind of tool. But
there's
think
multiple
about
data layers. There's not just one number that indicates it.
Oh, I was saying, in a perfect world, you can come up with an algorithm or a script and do this where you have a pH layer, you have an organic matter layer, you have a soil texture class layer. You would have to have all of those, and you could run a script based off of those things. But then still, you couldn't add your own personal, intimate knowledge of the field in there and just go like, you know what? Because of the pH being so high in these areas, it kicked out the high rate. And the algo says, nope, you're maxed out at this rate in this like poor salt area. But as the agronomist goes, I'm sacrificing the crop in that area, and I'm just gonna punch that thing down to the ground. I don't care if the crop goes with it too. I'm putting extra herbicide in there.
But with that algorithm, you are going exactly the same direction as I was thinking right there. So that was kind of fun. But with that algorithm, rather than actually making the rate map from that, from those data layers, you could actually make another zone map, a zone map that's particular for residual herbicide application. And then you could be assigning your rates for different residual herbicides based on that for different crops. And you could still have all the opportunity of doing all of the modding and everything else that you would want to do to your prescription. That's fun right there.
I like this.
So there's tons of, So this whole topic, there's like, we could just keep going and going and going. And so this isn't a simple topic. This has a lot of nuances, and there's a lot of application potential.
With that, I really think that Kyle actually just put the nail in the coffin on this conversation, one that could actually go on and on forever. This has been just such a blast visiting with you, Kyle, about this whole concept of residual herbicides from a variable rate standpoint. So thank you so much for your time on all 3 of these episodes. Again, if you didn't get a chance to catch the first 2, I recommend going back and catching the first 2 episodes with Kyle Okke on residual herbicides here. And thank you so much, Kyle.
Yeah, thank you both for having me on.
Thank you, Kyle, for the insight.
With that, at GK Technology, we have a map
and an app
for that.
No, I can't wait to get in the fields again.
Let the geeks at GK Technology help you with your agricultural data. Their agronomists know agriculture. When it comes to creating soils and zone maps to maximize yields in your fields, you can trust the people with decades of experience in site-specific agriculture. Everyone at GK Technology has a background in agriculture, so they know what makes a farm run, and they speak your language. The geeks at GK Technology have a map and an app for that.